Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9, 2023, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Good, for 30 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Constitution gives the responsibility for the nation's finances to the House of Representatives. It's the House's responsibility to pay the nation's debts, to manage the nation's finances, to protect our ability to borrow when necessary. Although the founders warned us about the dangers of excessive debt, the dangers of perpetual debt, and yet we find ourselves with the highest level of debt to our GDP that we have had since World War II. Of course, the World War II generation came out of a literal battle, a war to save the world from imperialist Japan and Nazi Germany, which of course caused significant borrowing to fund that war, to fund that conflict. But that generation paid that debt down to a manageable level shortly thereafter. But here we are today with $32 trillion in debt, nearly $100,000 per American citizen. I've said that many times on this floor, in committee hearings, in speeches, and interviews, $100,000 per American citizen. One time when I said this on this very floor, it was opposite the then budget chairman from the other side, Mr. Speaker, and when his turn came to speak, he said, "Stop saying that. We're not asking anybody to pay it back," as if it was not real, as if it was monopoly money, and if it didn't matter. However, the days of spending without consequence are now over. And I believe the American people are beginning to connect the numbers, the stats, the dollars, what they hear about with federal spending, the deficit, and the national debt to their own very lives, because the American people are suffering from 40-year high inflation. Matter of fact, the Consumer Price Index showed today that prices have risen 17% in the 2.5 years since President Biden took office. That means $1,000 in 2020 is now worth just $832 today. Americans are experiencing record high inflation, 40-year high inflation, but it's even higher than the 17% for the essentials, for groceries, for gasoline in the tank, for utilities, and yes, for housing costs. The average mortgage today, the average mortgage payment is $1,218, which is more than double what it was when President Biden assumed office. That is a direct result of the federal spending causing massive inflation, which was then reacted to by the Biden Fed that's raised interest rates to 20-year highs, further exacerbating the problem. And then, of course, we've had our credit rating lowered for just the second time in our history. Americans are suffering under this debt. Americans' futures are more bleak financially because of this debt. It's a terrible threat to our children and our grandchildren. And we, as a Republican majority, must do something about it. We, as a Republican majority, elected by the American people after running on a platform of fiscal responsibility, are leading a House of Representatives that will have a $2 trillion deficit this year. So we're here tonight with this special order time to talk about our spending, to talk about our deficit, to talk about our national debt, and to talk about the budget battle that we are in at this very moment, the appropriations process to fund our government, and what we will do with the faith and the trust the American people placed in us last November when they gave us the House majority. And so I'm pleased to be joined by a couple of my distinguished colleagues tonight. I have with me Congressman Ralph Norman from South Carolina and Congressman Clay Higgins from Louisiana. And I invite Mr. Norman to share thoughts that he has on this topic tonight.
Thank you, Bob. I just want to thank you for calling the special order. Folks, for those listening, we're in a pivotal point in the history of America. I have never felt the weight as I do now to, I guess, save the republic as I grew up in, to save the opportunity to realize your God-given talent and to realize the goals and aspirations that each individual has. Folks, I feel like it's under threat, and I know it's under threat since I was first elected in Congress in 2017. You know, we can all talk about what we're going to do and what we want to do. Folks, we're at a pivotal time. We have to do what it takes to save this republic. And as Congressman Good said, basically the debt is rampant. What's happening to this country at every level is, in one word, evil. I can't think of any other word to describe what we're going through in America that's evil, that threatens a democracy that we have known for 240 years. Now, what do I mean by what's evil about what's going on? What's different now than in years ago? Let me ask each one of you watching, when have you ever seen a country that basically has no borders? When have you ever seen a country that's letting everybody from every country in, no checks, no balances, come in and enjoy the fruits of this great republic? When have you ever seen the lawlessness that's taking place in America? When have you ever seen the criminals being basically protected over the victims that they have victimized? When have you seen that? When have you seen Americans scared to use their voice and to express their outrage? As Congressman Good has mentioned, when have you ever seen, and I think it's the last date I heard was 2008, when there's been a steady decline in the take-home pay of Americans? When have you ever seen our school system under attack? When have you ever seen young children who are being surgically, I'm trying to think of the word to use, but surgically destroyed, as you see today, for the sake of $1 by a medical profession? When have you ever seen a sitting leader of the free world, the sitting president, give $9 billion to a country that will blow us up every day of the week? When have you seen that? I don't think we have. And folks, I've just gone over just a few things that is different than it was today, than it was yesterday. It's Wake Up America. It's wake up to what we're facing. And I was just having a conversation with Congressman Higgins in what we face now. We're up here, we got here Tuesday, yesterday. We will leave tomorrow. We do not have a budget. We do not have a top line on the 12 appropriation bills. What do we have? You tell me. I'm a sitting member of Congress. I don't know. All I do know is I am not willing to spend this country into oblivion and continue to support what has been going on by this administration. I'm simply not willing to do it. I'm not willing to give more money to an executive office that is promoting lawlessness in this country. South Carolina has 5.2 million people. We have exceeded that on the illegals that are coming in this country. They're going to different cities in and all over this country. And I guess the ones who are at the forefront are New York City. When I heard Eric Adams talk about the crisis they're in, where was he when he declared New York City a sanctuary city? Where was he when he said, how are we going to pay for this? Where was he when he told the school districts that it's being overrun by illegals that are taking the place of people who have been in America, who have paid taxes, who have contributed to our economic system. Where was he? And now he's complaining he wants a bailout. So that all to say, it's our time to shine. It's dependent on each one of us to answer the call. Now, how do we do that? Well, we insist on physical sanity. Economic security is national security. And we have got to insist now to have regular order, which is what we thought we had when we voted for the Speaker in January, regular order, having the 12 appropriation bills on a conservative downward spending trend, and have a budget like every American business, every American family has. What do we have now? Nothing. Now, what's it up to us? It's up to us now to do whatever it takes to make sure we have a fiscally sound budget, to make sure each of the 12 appropriations are less than the pre-COVID levels, to have a border that's secure, that's enforceable, and to have the wokeness out of the military that is destroying the readiness of our great military people all across this country. So my message to each of you tonight: get active in your communities. Get active in telling your congressman. If it means shutting the government down before you get it right, shut it down. Shut it down until you get it right. It's easy to spend other people's money, but we want to give it back. That's one thing the Freedom Caucus and other members that are with me tonight, Congressman Good and Congressman Higgins, we want to give you money back. We're not going to add to the continual debt that is bankrupting our system. The cancer in this country cannot be cured by an aspirin. And what I'm asking each one of you today is take ownership in your communities. Take ownership from the local level, from the city council, school council, state house, and up. Take ownership in it. Let your voice be heard. You know what's at stake? One word: freedom. Freedom is at stake. Let's answer the call as we have always done. The onus is on us. God bless each and every one of you. And Congressman Good, thank you for allowing me a few minutes.
Mr. Speaker, as the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Norman, has said, debt is the opposite of freedom. There's a biblical principle to that. It says the borrower is a slave to the lender. And again, the founders warned us about the consequence of excessive debt. And I'm reminded, as Mr. Norman was speaking, that I feel like I'm living through the movie of How to Destroy a Country. How to Destroy a Country, produced by President Biden. If you were going to set out to destroy a country intentionally 2.5 years ago, what would you do different than the things that Mr. Norman has outlined today, whether it's our border invasion, purposefully, willfully facilitated by this administration, or whether it's our national debt, predominantly responsibility to the Democrat Party, but also contributed by Republicans. But we have the opportunity to do something about that now in this Congress. And so I'd like to recognize my friend from Louisiana, Mr. Clay Higgins. And Mr. Clay Higgins, express your thoughts accordingly.
I thank my colleague, Congressman Good, and I appreciate the words of wisdom of my colleague, Ralph Norman. Mr. Speaker, let me begin with an uplifting statement. God is still on the throne, and we, as humble children, we have a responsibility to be worthy of His love and His grace and the anointing of what it is to be an American citizen. So every generation of Americans has risen to face the challenge or the threat that our nation has endured now, 240 years. And in our generation, one of the most insidious threats that we face is the degree of debt that we have allowed in my generation, our nation, to assume. We now face a $33 trillion debt. That's $33,000 billion. Mr. Speaker, if this body were to balance the budget, which is our goal, by the way, is why we're here tonight addressing this chamber and the nation that we love, standing shoulder to shoulder with each other, so that our words are forever inscribed on the historical record of our country, that some stood to fight for the future of our republic, to restore fiscal sanity to this body. So were this body to produce a balanced budget, and we were to run a $1 billion surplus, Mr. Speaker, it would require 33,000 years to address a $33 trillion debt with a $1 billion surplus. And 1 billion is 1,000 million. Every American has imagined, well, what would I do if I had $1 million? I'd pay off my house, I'd settle my debts, I'd take care of my family, I'd build mother-in-law a house, I'd set aside some monies for my children and my grandchildren, I'd bring generational growth to my family. If I won the lottery and had $1 million. And in this town, we throw around trillions like it's nothing. Every dollar that we spend in deficit every year is put upon our grandchildren. Is this reflective of anointed value that our Lord has bestowed upon us as American citizens? As we stand beneath the glory, Mr. Speaker, of one flag, we are ultimately one people. And the challenge of this generation and this body and this majority party, this Republican Party, an honor that I wield not upon my lapel, but within my heart, of what it is to be a conservative, constitutionalist, Republican American citizen. And I stand in the body that's responsible to correct course that our nation has taken up. Because, Mr. Speaker, it was 1980 before America had accumulated $1 trillion of debt. 1980. Since then, we've added $32 trillion of debt. It took 200 years to accumulate $1 trillion of debt. And now we have $33 trillion. It's unsustainable. So we are demanding a correction of course because our nation is headed precipitously to a fiscal cliff beyond which we may never recover as a nation. And we love our country enough that we're willing to stand and fight for the future of our republic. And if it makes some of my colleagues uncomfortable, oh well. If you're willing to participate in the change of spending trajectory that this generation is required to produce, then stand with us. If not, if you don't quite have the courage, at least get out of our way. And if you oppose us, prepare for a fight. But we love our country enough to stand in this chamber and make some noise about the debt that we've accumulated and the deficit spending that we continue to add. And I ask my colleague, Congressman Good, perhaps you have a comment to share with the Speaker regarding the difference between our national debt and our annual deficit and how quickly we are adding to our debt at a rate that's never been seen in our history. I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. You know, we're going to spend some $20,000 per citizen this year. 330 million Americans, we're going to spend nearly $7 trillion in a Republican majority Congress. We're going to spend nearly $7 trillion, about $20,000 per citizen. We will borrow $6,000 of that $20,000. This year alone, we will borrow $6,000 per citizen, not per taxpayer, not per household, but per citizen. Of the $20,000 we'll spend this year, only $3,000 per citizen, the $20,000 per citizen that we will spend, only $3,000 per citizen will be for the primary responsibility of the federal government, the safety and security of the nation, to defend the nation.
Right.
We'll spend $20,000 per citizen, we'll borrow $6,000 of that, and only $3,000 of the $20,000 will be for protecting the nation from foreign invasion, keeping the nation safe and secure. To Congressman Higgins' point, with the explosion of debt from $1 trillion in 1980 to now nearly $33 trillion today, the interest on the debt, what we're paying to service the debt, is about $1 trillion a year. And with interest rates rising, that cost is only going to go higher in addition to the spending disaster that we're experiencing. So what are we prepared to do? You know, it doesn't matter what you believe in. It doesn't matter what you say you stand for if you're not willing to have the courage of your convictions, to take risks, to fight for that for which you claim to believe. And I will take, it's no secret or no coincidence, I should say, that the gentleman with me tonight, another thing we share in common, Mr. Norman from South Carolina, Mr. Higgins from Louisiana, is we're members of the House Freedom Caucus. And I believe the American people are counting on us and putting their hope in us that maybe we will be the ones who will make this stand and not betray them and not let them down. I go back to January. What January's speaker battle was ultimately about was that we as a new Republican majority would not do what we've always done and therefore fail as we have failed to deliver for the American people, particularly when it comes to fighting to cut our spending. Yes, Democrats are better at spending than Republicans are, but Republicans have contributed as well with a failure to follow through on the things that we run on. So we had commitments made in January that we were going to cut our spending at least back to pre-COVID levels for non-defense discretionary spending. Pre-COVID levels, which was the highest level of spending in the history of the country at that point. The most reckless, bloated, and excessive spending in the history of the country at that point. We voted together as a Republican conference to that effect in April. We voted together for pre-COVID level spending in April with the Limit, Save, Grow bill. However, that was discarded with the debt ceiling agreement, where the Republican House came together with the Democrat majority in the House and the Senate and the White House for a debt ceiling agreement that is unlimited till January of 25. As much money as Congress can gleefully come together and spend between now and January 25, where most projections will be $36 trillion in debt by that time. We were told when we were negotiating the debt ceiling bill, and when the debt ceiling bill came forward, which we did not vote for, my colleagues and I, well, we will fight during the appropriations process. That's when we'll fight to cut our spending. Matter of fact, we were told when we were negotiating H.R. 1, the energy bill, we will fight during the appropriations process to cut our spending. We were told when we were fighting for the H.R. 2 Secure the Border Act that we would begin to cut spending during the appropriations. Even during the NDA negotiations, we were told that we would use the appropriations process to cut our spending. We were told we would pass 12 appropriations bills out of this House implementing Republican priorities at pre-COVID level spending for non-defense discretionary spending. And now we are at a crisis point where will we deliver for the American people? We're only talking about $115 billion in spending cuts to reach that pre-COVID level. $115 billion when we are running a monthly deficit, to Mr. Higgins' point, of $150 billion a month. And so what we need to do is come together as a Republican majority, pass our 12 bills that implement our spending, our policy priorities, our legislative priorities, do our job here in the House, cut our spending to pre-COVID levels that we committed to doing in January and in April, send it to the Senate, and demand that they pass those House bills that the American people elected us to pass. And then if the Senate wants to shut down the government, let them shut it down. Because, Mr. Higgins, when I am in my district, we both came from our districts over these last few weeks, the American people didn't express concern to me that the government might shut down. The American people expressed concern to me about our national debt. They expressed concern to me about our spending. They expressed concern about rising crime. They expressed concern about the border invasion. They expressed concern about the weaponization of the federal government against them, a two-tiered justice system. They expressed concern about the faith and confidence in our election system. And the way for us to address those issues is by passing our bills, implementing our policies, and cutting our spending. Mr. Higgins, some final thoughts that you might have.
I thank my colleague. Our nation, Mr. Speaker, we can still succeed reflective of the will of the people that we have sworn to serve. What we require in order to deliver is not an imagined, unreachable goal or an unreasonable demand. What we require of our Republican colleagues is that they embrace the core principles upon which the Republican Party has been built. Just stand upon the core principles that you claim to possess and help us save our country from bankruptcy. We have the power of the purse. And may I say, with respect to my colleagues in the Senate, the founders knew what they were doing when they created a bicameral Congress. If they wanted a unicameral Congress, they'd have had one. That was stated last night at our Freedom Caucus meeting. Words of wisdom spoken. We are the House of Representatives. We are the voice of we the people. We control the nation's wealth or squander it. And we have reached a point that is untenable to continue. So we ask our colleagues, my brothers and sisters, the most conservative rank of our conference, the Freedom Caucus, we ask our brothers and sisters across the conference, all of whom we respect, we ask our Speaker, whom we elected, to stand with the conservative voice that is itself reflective of the voice of the people we've sworn to serve. Let us change the trajectory of spending across our 12 appropriations bills, which are filled with conservative policy that's transformative for our nation if we can pass those bills. Let us join and stand as one and pass those bills reflective of our agreement at 2022 spending levels and in some cases pre-COVID 2019 spending levels. None of us here, Mr. Speaker, would stand and say that the federal government was too small in 2019 or didn't spend enough money in 2022. All we ask is a reasonable adjustment to the trajectory of spending. This is why we speak to you tonight, Mr. Speaker, and we ask that our voices be heard respectfully by our colleagues. Let us save our republic.
May we meet the moment. May we be that transformational Congress that cuts spending and does not let the American people down. Mr. Norman, the final minute that we have, I yield to you for final thoughts.
Mr. Speaker, where we are right now is we have a great opportunity to save this republic. And in the words of Winston Churchill, who at the depths of the lows of Great Britain, his words, there'll be a time when doing your best isn't good enough. You got to do what's required. We have got to do what's required. That's going to require courage. That's going to require stamina. And that's going to require the one word that we all live under, this one flag, we're one people, representing freedom. God bless each and every one of you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We yield back.
Thank you, Congressman Good, and thank you, Congressman Norman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House